In this video, I just want to show you the size of a handmade lucet that will give you a tightly knit cord with worsted weight yarn. This is worsted weight fisherman wool, and you can see that when I first started the stitches, it is a loose cord, and in my first video on the lucet, I was showing mostly loose cords because I was going to use them for weaving, and they're a little bit more flexible, and they're especially good for hand spun cotton. But this is, like I said, fisherman wool, and this is the same stick lucet I had in the first video, and as you can see, this will now knit a fairly tight worsted weight 2-stitch cord, and this would be good for braiding on clothes or any kind of decorative use you wanted to. Or what I may do is use it just like my Knitting Nancy strands and pretend it's a little bit more tightly knit strand, such as a Knitting Nancy would make, and I'll make similar things with this that I would with that. So let me just give you the measurements here of this particular lucet. It is from tip to the bottom is 7 inches long, but the main important thing is this part right here where the stitches are. There's a black line where the 1 inch starts. It is 1 inch across right there. Now I'll move these up. What I did was put 2 notches in this. There's one of them on the left. Very simple to put notches like that in this, and I pointed the tips a little bit like that. Now what I'm doing is when I knit this strand, in between each set of 2 stitches, I pull the working yarn tight, whichever direction it's coming from. If you just pull on it and have those 2 main stitches tight before you wrap it around to make new stitches, and then you'll get a fairly consistent well knit worsted weight 2-stitch strand. A square cord is what it's called. Now to cut the notches, I used both my Swiss Army knife, and this is a flex cut carving knife. Either one. If you're using the flex cut, you'll want a thumb guard, or something like that. You'll want a thumb guard so you don't get cut. Now these are the other 2 big lucets I still had to cut. Now you can see that I've marked them with chalk, and I think this is 4.5 inches wide at this point, 6 inches at this point, and it's 7.5 at this point. So now I'm going to get different weight of yarns and knit some stitches at those points before I cut any notches. So I may decide I only want it at this point, and I may actually trim the branches up here, cut the notches here, and have a 4.5 inch wide lucet. So that's all you need to do when you find your forked stick, is put some marks in chalk on the branches and do some test knitting until you get the tightness of the cord that you want with the yarn you're going to be using for the most part, and then go ahead and cut some notches. Here's another one I've done the same thing with. I've got marks on there. So it just makes it easier to mark the branches before you cut them. And like I said, this was really why I made the video. A 1 inch wide stitch area between the 2 prongs of a fork and a 7 inch long lucet. I lean the bottom end up on my stomach if I, as I'm knitting. Or you could lean it on anything. You could stick it into a little anything that'll hold it up if it's easier for you. I have seen some that don't have a handle that end here. Obviously the two prongs have to be held together, but you could also cut it off here and just hold it in your hand. But anyway, 1 inch wide working stitch area and 7 inches long is good for worsted weight. This is yarn, wool yarn. I'm sure worsted weight cotton would work up the same way.